Hello, family. This is Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer, with another episode of Role Model Maker Experts Interview. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Miss Natalie Cutler-Welsh, and she is a speaker, author, impact entrepreneur, and mother of three. She's a Canadian Kiwi, and I had been talking to her last week, and I loved her message and how she shows up in the world. And I decided to bring her on so that she could share her message and tell you all about herself and how she can help people. So without further ado, Natalie, welcome aboard and take it away.
Thank you so much. It's amazing to connect with you again. It's quite early for me. I'm over here in New Zealand. So despite my accent, which is Canadian, I'm living in New Zealand and we're in the winter at the moment.
Awesome, awesome. So tell us about your story of how you got to do what you do and basically what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so my main message at the moment, and well, for many, many years, is really up your brave. So I say to people, when they say, what do you do? I'm like, I help people to up their brave. And then they're like, what do you mean? And so what that means is really it's around confidence and resilience. If they're entrepreneurs, I work a lot with women in business. It's also around the visibility piece. So helping them to amplify their impact on stage, screen, and media. So that's my business thing. But also my background, I'm actually a parenting author and a podcaster with over 200 podcasts all about the early years of parenting. So I bring in a lot of that. And what I really help people do is to get out of the should zone or the frustration zone, wherever they're living their life, and help them get to what I like to call the impact zone. And they have to up their brave to get there.
Okay. So tell me more about this up your brave. Why is that important?
Well, when I talk about the impact zone, that's where you're living your life coming from a place of empowered choices and intentional actions, meaning you're literally doing what you want to be doing. And I always touch my heart when I say that, because you're not just doing what you said you would or you think you should. So I'll start with the other zones and that'll help to clarify. So what I've noticed in my 15 years plus working with women entrepreneurs, moms and dads, in New Zealand, but also internationally, is that people tend to be living their life in one of four zones. So the first zone is the disconnected zone. And in that zone, it's like, right? In the disconnected zone, you are going through the motions of life. You're going to work, you're coming home, you're making dinner, you're dropping your kids at school or not, as the case may be. And, but you're not really connected in your heart and your mind and your presence to doing that. You're just kind of doing what needs to get done. The next zone is the should zone. Now, when I was in the early years of parenting, like meaning the first, 3 or 5 years, that's what my book is all about, which I'm happy to talk about later if you want. I was really in the should zone where I was like looking at the clock going, my husband should be home by now, or I should have more me time. Like, so it was really this blamey, judgmenty kind of negative vibe. Or like I'd wake up in the morning, I'd look at the clock and I'd be like, ugh, how much broken sleep did I not get last night? Like I just had this energy because I felt like I'd lost my identity and I just didn't have any time for me time, and all the things. So I was living life in the should zone. And I know that it's really easy to slip into that zone for people. And you're in the should zone when you're using words like should, need, and just. And so nowadays I'll catch myself. Obviously, I've changed my energy. I changed the way I'm showing up and look at the world. But I'll literally be typing a message to someone and I'll say, yep, I can meet you for coffee. I just need to pick Jonah up from hip hop. And then I'll go delete, delete, delete. I want to pick Jonah up from hip hop and I can catch you after that. So I'll change the languaging, which changes the way that you show up and the way that you feel. So that's the should zone. More on that later. The next zone is the frustration zone. Okay. So in the frustration zone, we're really at that point where we're getting, enough is enough. We're getting frustrated. And this is a dangerous zone because this is when it starts to really impact your health, your wellness, your relationships, your marriage, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And at that point, you either need to really up your brave and move forward to the impact zone, or else you're going to just slip back into the should or the disconnected, or stay in the frustration zone, which is probably the most dangerous place to be.
So when you say when you say should or just, those words sound to me that you're either projecting yourself into the future or living in the past, and you're not in the moment and
Mhm.
not on purpose, basically. Is
Mhm.
that true?
Yeah, that's a good observation. I feel like those words like need, oh, I need to do this. It's kind of this victim languaging, like you're not in charge. One of the things I say a lot these days is you are the CEO of your own life. You are the CEO. I have a story. You are the CEO of your own pie. I tell that story as well. But the main point is like stop naming, shaming, blaming, and complaining and start taking ownership. And that's why the impact zone, when you're doing what you genuinely want. And here's the key. What I find for a lot of parents, especially mothers, and I talk a lot about motherhood martyrdom, where we put ourselves last priority under the dog in terms of priority, is we're not saying what we want. Like we're just like, we're thinking it, we're going, oh my God, but we're not saying it. And we're putting ourselves in that position. So here's a really quick story if you want one. So I call this the smoked salmon bagel story. So I was in the bakery. I have a few stories about the bakery. Up the road from me is this bakery, which is amazing. And I was in the bakery with my kids. This is probably 5 years ago. And they're all, oh, mommy, can I have this gingerbread man? Oh, can I have a pie? And I'm like, yes, sweetheart, of course, anything you want. And then I'm looking at this smoked salmon bagel and I'm going, and I'm Canadian. We love our bagels. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks so yummy. And I was like, oh, in my brain, oh, but it's, $4.50. And what's Matt going to say, because I'm spending and I'm making Matt, my husband, wrong for
Mhm.
not letting me get the bagel. He's not even in the room. And I'm like, doing this thing in my mind. But of course I'm like, yes, darlings, you can have whatever you want. But would I get what I want? No, because I'm like, I can't even buy myself a coffee. I can't even go to the toilet by myself because people are always interrupting me. I was really in that mode of the should zone and making someone else wrong who wasn't even there, and just depriving myself of what I truly desired, which in that moment was a bagel. And I feel like we do this a lot in the micro moments. So if we can shift that and acknowledge, what is it that I want? You know what? I really want that bagel. Okay. You know what? And then make an empowered choice about it. And it wasn't about weight for me. It was about money. And so it was, and what my husband would think. And that's why I didn't buy the bagel. And I didn't buy the bagel, by the way.
Mm.
So that's my little story. And I really would like to encourage people to think, when do you do this? When do you have that bagel moment when you put everyone else first and you deprive yourself of what you genuinely want, whether it be something massive like a life goal or something tiny like a bagel in a bakery? And how can you shift that energy and shift your actions and your mindset to really live your life more in that impact zone of empowered choices and intentional actions?
Right. I feel like we should just pause and just go, and everybody should just go and get a bagel right now and
Or
come
get a
back.
bagel.
That sounded really tasty.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, and that kind of makes you bitter for no reason, basically. It's something that you're entitled to have, but you just got to allow yourself to have that. So wonderful. I love it. What are the three challenges that you typically see people face when they're approaching you? What are the typical things that you see people struggle with?
Yeah, it would be. So you mentioned bitterness, and that's one of the other things in the should zone. If you stay there long enough, it can turn into bitterness and resentment, which of course, if you keep that, can turn into physical health and wellness issues as well. So lots of things happening there. So some of the three things that people come to me about is anxiousness, anxiety. I get asked that all the time. And I'm not a life coach and I'm not a doctor, but because I work a lot with women entrepreneurs and mums, and women that aren't entrepreneurs, but they do have kids, so they're moms, and they come to me about overwhelm for themselves.
Mhm.
And nowadays, a lot anxiety for their kids, like anxiousness for their children. But as you know, often they'll be like, come for their kid, and then it'll be something that we can help them with as well. But of course, their motherhood martyrdom, they don't come for themselves. Usually they come for what's going on with their kids, and then I can help them because I do have a wellness component also to my business, because I noticed all these overwhelmed moms or overworked entrepreneurs, they weren't looking after number one,
Right,
themselves.
right.
And so that's where now I'm like really encouraging them to do that so they can get out of one of those danger zones and get into the good one.
It's very interesting that you mentioned anxiousness because
Mm.
from my neuroscience background, anxiousness, anxiety, and depression are usually timing problems in the brain. That anxiousness is when you're projecting yourself forward, and depression is when you're in the past, basically.
Yes.
And it's very interesting that you brought that up, and it does affect your brain, its timing, its ability to coordinate different thought processes. And as you said, it's very easy for us to get into the habits of projecting ourselves in the past or the future and disconnecting different parts of our brains that are actually supposed to be working synergistically and in making us happier, making us feel more fulfilled. So very good points. So what are your tips on how to help people that are dealing with these?
Yeah, well, I guess the third one that people come to me about is that they're ready to shine. So that's almost the kind of the opposite, where they're like, you know what? They're at the frustration zone a little bit, but they're like, enough is enough. Like, I'm ready to be seen and heard on a bigger level. And that's the business people, and they're talking about speaking, visibility, online webinars, in the media, that type of thing. But even the moms who don't have a business, they're like, you know what? Enough is enough. Like, it's my time to shine. So they are ready to maybe go, you know what? I am going to buy myself this, $50 bottle of oil because it's, it helps me. It's called the Tranquil Blend. And I'm not just going to buy my kids gingerbread man and cookies at the bakery. Like, I'm going to buy something for myself, and that's okay. And so I guess the moms that I'm working with, they're either in that overwhelm, anxiousness, usually the children, but also themselves, or they're like ready to shine and they just want me to help them to do that. So it's quite this interesting spectrum, but those are definitely the three things for sure.
You mentioned oils, and I know we do a lot of coaching and consulting, which is auditory, which is one of the senses. But you mentioned oil. That made me think of another thing. Another one of our very important, very primitive senses that affects our deeper brain centers is actually scent and oils and things like that. So that's another form of stimulation people often forget about, that certain scents can actually go ahead and trigger you, but also certain scents can go ahead and make a positive impact on your brain's activities and waking up and things like that.
Exactly. And one of the things I love talking about is anchoring to your strengths and anchoring to your positive memories. So sometimes when people aren't feeling resilient, they're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, I always encourage them to reconnect with your resilience. So think of a time when you did persevere, whether it was a challenge that you chose, like a marathon, or a challenge that chose you, like for me, when we lived through the massive earthquake, whatever it might be, you can anchor, and you just drop a bit of oil in your hand and you can breathe it in.
Right.
And many, many times, and really bring to mind that that positive memory, that positive feeling, and use that later, just to draw on that later on to help you persevere through hard times as well.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we were talking about tips. I know, like we mentioned the oil as one of the things. What are some of the other golden nuggets that you have for the audience as far as upping their brain?
Yes. So one of my favorite things to say to people, these words will change your life. Say what you want, right? Say what you want. And so I'll give you an example. This is a very family example. And this is a true story, maybe 3 years ago. I said to my husband, hey babe, so tomorrow, which was Saturday, tomorrow, are you swimming? Are you running? Like, what is your plan? And and he's like, so I'm like, are you going to swim? Are you going to run? Cause he's really into fitness. And he's like, what do you want? And I'm like, I want to go to Pilates at 7. He's like, I'll be home at 6:30. Done. Right? I was like all over, yap, yap, yap. Do you want this? Do you want that, honey, babe, whatever? And he's like, what do you want? Like, cut to the chase, right? What do you want? And I'm like, I don't really care if he was running or swimming or going kayaking or whatever. Like, I just wanted to go to my Pilates class. Right. And so this is where we want to be more direct with our communication. People talk a lot about, clear communication, but I feel like often we dance around it, what we actually want. And we don't say what we want. And either we literally don't say it and we're all grumpy and we do the silent treatment. Some people might go down that path, or we kind of dance around it and we're not super clear. And so in my family, we have this culture where it's like, what do you want? Like, or say what you want. And we just say that actual phrase, and it makes the person go, like, what do I want? And then they say what they want. Another example, I'm serving my children blueberries. They love like frozen berries that we heat up, and they're like warm berries, right? The boys are sitting I've got 3 kids, but the boys are sitting at the table, and Jonah says, Mom, Xavier got more than me. And I'm like, what do you want? He goes, more berries, please. Done. right? Because
Right.
he was complaining, which kids do, but naming, shaming, blaming, and complaining is really a lame excuse for not saying what you want. Like, really, if we all just said what we want,
Right.
not in a demanding, bossy way, but in a, actually, you know what? I would like more berries. Or, you know what? I would love to go to Pilates at 7 tomorrow. So can you be home in time? So it's just that little shift and bringing that family culture of saying, what do you want? Or say what you want. It's a game changer. I've had friends of mine come up to me and go, oh my God, Nat, that thing you told me, like, it's saving my marriage. And I was like, yes, that's so amazing.
That is powerful. That is amazing. So thank you for that. Um, so how can people learn more about what you have and connecting with you and learning more about
Yeah, well, I am in New Zealand, but I'm very much online. So I'm on Instagram and I'll let you know what it is. It's at GoToGirlNZ. And I have a new website that's recently launched. It's called upyourbrave.com. So that is there's more goodies coming there. I actually have a video series all around leadership, resilience, visibility, parenting as well. People can check that out for free. If they want to have a look at our book, of course, it's on Amazon. So I'll give you the link for that as
it?
well.
Awesome.
If
Awesome.
only they told me. And that's a podcast that is available. And it's really for the early years, all the things you wish you'd been told from pregnancy to starting school. So it's, if you've got a child, even if it's your fourth child, age 0 to 5, that's what we're talking about in here. But if your kids are older than that, then we can talk about other things. I'm in the teen and tween stage now, which I'm finding almost like the honeymoon stage at the moment. It's really sweet right now.
Right. Well, a lot of times also what happens in those early years become the foundation for all the stuff that happens thereafter.
Yes.
So definitely, definitely. I'll make
All
sure
that work we put in.
I know. So we're going to make sure that we put all the links in the description box for the audience. Make sure that you go ahead and check those and valuable stuff there. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll give you the link. I've got a little free download. It's called 6 Tips to Up Your Brave in Life and Business. So I can provide that too.
Awesome. Awesome. Wonderful, Natalie. Any final words of wisdom for the audience before we finish?
Well, my favorite saying and something to really just keep in mind is just remember, whether you're going through a life challenge or you're not in the zone you want to be in. When I speak to audiences, I literally explain the zones. And I say to them, I don't need to know what zone you're in. I just need you to know what zone you're in. So I would say to people, have a think, really, what zone are you in? And you might go, well, I'm in the should zone in my job. Because, like, honestly, but everything else is fine. So you hone in, where in my life am I in the should zone or in the frustration zone? It might be your marriage, it might be your job. It doesn't mean it defines you. You're just going, where in my life am I in the should zone or disconnected zone or the frustration zone? And how can I up my brave? And how can I say what I want to really shift as much as possible into that impact zone? And because when you're in that zone, your energy changes and it trickles down to everybody in your life, including your kids and husband and your coworkers and your friends as well. So the main thing really is to up your brave, say what you want, and make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for staying with us and being with us on this show. And thank you, Natalie, for coming on the show and sharing your wonderful wisdom and information. We look forward to seeing you all in a future episode. Thank you. Cheers.